The tale unfolds as the main character, Aryam, undergoes a sudden and dramatic shift in her life. Struck by the infamous truck Kun, she finds herself transported to a fantastical realm known as Sultura. However, this wasn't a typical teleportation that bestowed superpowers upon her. Instead, Aryam becomes entangled in a dark situation, captured by slavers who auction her off as a vampire. Despite the fantastical setting, Aryam doesn't possess any supernatural abilities, and her new reality is far from the typical hero's journey. The auctioneer sets her price at 150,000 gold pieces, labeling her as a vampire in a world where such creatures are feared. Unfortunately, no buyers show interest considering vampires to be too spooky. Ultimately, she was purchased by the House of Duke and escorted to the palace. Throughout this bewildering journey, Aryam visibly displayed her fear and confusion about the abrupt turn her life has taken. The Duke's representative warns her about the dangerous nature of Duke Millard, emphasizing that he might devour her if displeased. Expecting a ferocious beast, Aryam met Duke Millard, only to find a surprisingly pleasant guy. Curious, he asked her if she was a vampire. In her confusion, she denied it. And that's when Duke Millard's excitement turned into utter disappointment. Duke Millard, now realizing he had been scammed, was left utterly speechless. He had spent a small fortune expecting a creature of the night only to get a lowly with 0 vampire perks. Millard had a sudden brainwave and beckoned her over. As she cautiously approached, he seized her hand and the weirdo in him promptly bit it. To his horror, he realized her blood tasted like piss, and he spat it out. Aryam was left bewildered, wondering why this oddball was gnawing on her. Worry crept in as she thought Millard might just decide to end her life because her blood wasn't up to vampire standards. Meanwhile, Millard scratched his head, confused by what kind of creature Aryam could be. Not quite human, not quite vampire. Contemplating the situation, Millard pondered what to do with this enigmatic blood source. Aryam, realizing her predicament, decided her best shot at survival was to offer her services. She pleaded that she was really good at cleaning and laundry. However, Millard was having none of it, dismissively declaring he didn't need her. Frustrated, Aryam threatened to spill the beans to Duke. After some relentless pleading and negotiating, Duke reluctantly agreed to keep her on as a maid. Aryam, escorted to her room by another maid, found solace in tears, reminiscing about her family. The next morning she was greeted with a maid uniform, transforming her into the spitting image of a stereotypical maid. Baffled, Aryam wondered why, if this place hated vampires so much, they still served one. Guided to Duke's room, she was tasked with finding the missing piece of a puzzle he was working on. Miraculously, she discovered it under his bed. Now entrusted with a new mission, she had to move some books to the study room. The only hiccup, she had no idea where it was. Returning to Duke's room for guidance, a knife whizzed past her head. Duke, with a dramatic flair, pinned her against the wall, demanding to know who gave her permission to invade his space. Finding herself face to face with the imposing Duke, Aryam felt her cheeks turn into many Niagara Falls. In a panic, she stammered out an apology, prompting the Duke to summon his right-hand man, Logan. Apparently, Logan was the guy who won her at the auction for the Duke. Logan took on the role of tour guide, leading Aryam through the labyrinthine halls and rooms of the mansion. She was entrusted with the crucial task of delivering a meal to Duke Millard. As they approached Millard's table, ready to perform their culinary mission, Millard decided to change the script. He ordered Aryam to take a seat. Surprising her, Millard's keen vampire eyes spotted a bloodstain on her foot. Logan was being summoned to play escort duty to the medic. In the medical room, Aryam met Marin, who wasted no time asking about her age. Pretty suspicious behavior. As they chatted, Aryam couldn't help but notice Marin's striking resemblance to Harley Quinn from that Joker movie. Post-bandaging, Millard, in a burst of whimsy, tasked Aryam with counting the number of times the word Millard appeared in a book. She dove into the literary challenge, working her butt off and proudly presenting a grand total of 1068. Little did she know, Millard was slightly taken aback by her accuracy, triggering a nostalgic flashback. As a child, someone had locked him in a room with the same counting chore. As the days rolled on, Aryam found herself settling into the routine, though she still approached the food with caution. One night, while delivering Millard's dinner, Aryam sensed something was off. Concerned, she tried to play the caring nurse. Millard, however, brushed off her efforts, ordering her to summon someone to the flora. Confused about what the flora was, Aryam sought guidance from the other maids. To her dismay, they not only ignored her but also threw in some good old-fashioned trash-talking, fueled by jealousy over her quick bonding with Millard. Undeterred, Aryam approached the head maid and relayed Millard's requests. Still puzzled about the flora, she sought clarification from Millard, who remained characteristically unhelpful. Later that night, Millard assigned her the task of reading dates aloud, but Aryam, in a fit of mild rebellion, started complaining. The head maid barged in with important news, leading them to a room where Aryam was instructed to fetch Marin. As they walked, Marin couldn't resist letting out some jealousy-induced complaints. Together, they entered the room where Millard was, and lo and behold, a pink-haired lady looking more like a femboy was sitting on the bed. Rose introduced herself and, with a sly wink, inquired if Millard had found a partner for channeling his energy. Rose then dropped a bomb about something called a decree hearing, leaving Aryam utterly confused. Who knew vampire politics could be so confusing? So it turns out, decree was like mortal-immortal marriage with a bonus round if the mortal spouse manages to off the vampire duke. They hit the jackpot of wealth. Talk about a financial plan with a twist. Aryam, discovering this vampire matrimony hack from Rose, realized that Millard had mistaken her kindness as a ploy for a decree partnership. To clear things up, she bravely ventured into Millard's ominous room. In the shadow of Millard's dark aura, Aryam hesitated before mustering the courage to spill the tea. She clarified that she was there solely to serve him out of goodwill and had no decree ambitions. However, instead of a stern response, Millard, captivated by her lowly-esque explanation, burst into laughter. The next day at the office, Aryam decided to flaunt her creativity by crafting a paper crane. Little did she know this innocent origami attempt would backfire. Millard, eyeing the paper masterpiece, declared that she should mass-produce them. Later that day, Aryam stumbled upon the palace chapel and was in awe of its beauty. The Pope, with his majestic presence, seemed like the epitome of holiness. But alas, the initial awe faded quickly as the sermon turned into a historical reenactment class for Aryam. Yawn-inducing, to say the least, the Pope then whipped out some holy concoction in a bucket, producing a glow. Aryam, wide-eyed, couldn't believe her eyes. Summoning the attendees, the Pope invited them for a blessing. When Aryam's turn came, she chatted with him and discovered he was surprisingly friendly, though she couldn't shake the feeling that he was a tad sus. The Pope inquired about Aryam's backstory, but she skillfully dodged the question, claiming she had a date with Millard. The Pope, revealing he had the same plans, suggested they go together. Arriving at Millard's room, the Pope proposed the idea of Millard attending that time. However, Millard, acting like a bratty kid, initially declined. Instead, he opted for the more sophisticated activity of folding paper cranes with Aryam. As they sat down to make paper origamis, Aryam couldn't contain her confusion and questioned why the Pope referred to Millard as an elder. Millard revealed they were blood-related but with a significant age gap, 16 to 17 generations to be precise. One fateful night, the head maid rudely interrupted her beauty sleep, instructing her to fetch Millard from his office to the bedroom. "Oh, and there might be a dead body involved," she added with a deadpan expression, advising Aryam to act surprised. Now that's a wake-up call. Entering Millard's room, Aryam encountered the scene. Millard decked out like an overrated anime protagonist, sword in hand and a blood-stained floor. Millard, with the demeanor of Keanu Reeves, questioned her intrusion. Ignoring his inquiry, Aryam suggested a wardrobe change first as she cleaned him up. Millard, baffled by her lack of fear, questioned her nonchalant attitude. Aryam, in her signature lowly manner, explained that there were times she found him scary and times she didn't. She then smoothly shifted the conversation, asking for the lowdown on the bloodbath. The next day, as Millard lounged in his office, he noticed Ariam acting oddly and couldn't resist asking. Ariam, quick on her feet, claimed she was planning to discuss her hometown with the Pope. Surprisingly, Millard granted her permission. In the chapel, Ariam stood before the Pope. But the real star was Marin, who revealed Ariam's vampiric origins. The Pope decided to play detective. Placing his thumb on Ariam's head, a mysterious light shone upon it. Convinced by the divine glow, the Pope declared her not a vampire. The Pope dropped a bombshell, telling Ariam she was neither human nor vampire, but an empty shell. Returning to Millard's office, she told him what happened. In an oddly possessive move, Millard bit his finger and left a bloody mark on her forehead. As if that weren't quirky enough, he handed her a book titled Research on Blood Collection, the kind of book that might get you side-eyed at the library. Millard warned her it was a banned and dangerous book. Panicked, Ariam questioned why he'd give her such a thing. Millard claimed it was about vampires and urged her to give it a read. Little did she know, the book was a hot potato brought to Millard by the assassins who failed miserably at taking him down. As night fell, Logan dropped the news bomb. Count Franager, the banned book enthusiast, committed suicide, blaming Millard in the note. Ariam, now officially part of the vampire drama, tagged along with Millard to the funeral. Franager's son, however, wasn't in the mood for pleasantries, blaming everything on Millard, our gigachad. Millard, unfazed, paid his respects and dipped back at the palace ready for maid duties. The head maid pulled a classic prank. Ariam was sent on an egg-fetching mission and found herself grabbing air. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the back door, snatched her, leaving behind a lone shoe. After that, Ariam woke up in a wooden cabin, face to face with none other than the femboy-looking man named Urian Miller. Fearful, but trying to keep her cool, Ariam listened as Urian promised to return her home if she answered some questions. Truthfully sensing her anxiety, Urian called, and his servant, who brought her there, poured hot coffee on his own head in a bizarre apology, and then ordered the poor soul's execution. Just an ordinary day, right? As Urian was about to unleash more chaos, Ariam, in an act of mercy, screamed for him to stop. This maniac's twisted smile in response hinted at an even darker side. Urian then spilled the beans on his real intentions. He wanted Ariam to enter into a decree with Millard to sweeten the deal. He dangled a hefty price tag for her cooperation. However, even in the midst of the chaos, Ariam could see through Urian's slimy facade. Back in the Duke's office, Millard was playing detective with the head maid, extracting every bit of information about Ariam's connection to the head king. Ariam stood her ground against Urian's decree proposal, bluntly telling him she had zero intentions of getting cozy with Millard in any form of matrimonial venture. Urian, surprisingly chill about it, thanked her for the honesty and graciously allowed her to make a swift exit. Taking a carriage straight to the palace, Ariam couldn't help but fret over what the Duke might think of her sudden disappearance. Gathering her courage, she ventured to Millard's room only to witness him in a state of sheer desperation, bursting out of the door like a bat out of hell. Ariam, overwhelmed, began pouring her heart out about the cabin ordeal, but in a moment of brick-induced impulsivity, Millard planted a kiss on her. The unexpected lip lock left Ariam in a daze, and Millard, seizing the moment, scooped her up and brought her inside. Inside the room, Ariam spilled the beans about the head maid's shady role, urging Millard to give her the boot. However, Millard, in a classic boss move, defended the head maid's job performance. Ariam, confused, asked why he didn't come to her rescue. At the cabin, Millard left her to connect the dots herself. Closing the curtains for some added dramatic flair, Millard embarked on an exposition journey. He told Ariam about the imperial family's plot to make him mortal through a human-vampire union. The catch? The imperial family had a murderous vendetta against his potential wives, and he couldn't just find a vampire bride in the realm. He ruled wide-eyed, learned the shocking truth. Whoever became Millard's wife would have a target on their back from day one. Now, the second prince had decided to play the sugar daddy card with Ariam. Next thing she knew, he sent her a pair of shoes. However, when she ventured into Millard's room ready for the inevitable interrogation, he surprised her by not getting mad at all. Instead, he casually told her to use the gift and any other fabulous products she received. Just when Aryam thought the gift saga was over, the second prince struck again, gifting her an apron. This time, Millard didn't reciprocate. To smooth things over, Aryam decided to apologize. With a touch of flower power, she got Millard some flowers and attached a note filled with sweet sentiments about the value of his gifts. However, instead of receiving gratitude, she got a cold dismissal. Confused by the abrupt reaction, Aryam left the room, leaving Millard alone with his newfound flower fragrance obsession. Aryam found herself accused of breaking a glass vase by an irate maid. Aryam, innocent as a kitten, protested her innocence, but the maid wasn't buying it. With a sigh, Aryam agreed to clean up the mess. Just another day in the vampire mansion. In a cinematic flashback, Millard reminisced about creating the blue teapot himself. Why? Because he enjoyed the taste of poison, and being a vampire, it didn't bother him. Just your average vampire with a weird palate. As Aryam scurried to find the bead box, she crossed paths with the mad maid from before, who accused her of snitching to the Duke. Aryam, baffled, denied the allegations. But before she could protest further, the maid locked her out in the cold confines of the bathing area. A maid named Isabel helped Aryam out and escorted her to her room. She then informed the Duke about it. He was pretty angry. Hearing that, he then went to Aryam's room to see her. Millard decided to show a softer side when Aryam fell ill. In a moment of rare seriousness, Millard apologized to Aryam, promising to change his ways. Apparently, he realized he hadn't been the most careful caretaker, and Aryam's condition was proof of that. Just when things seemed to be taking a turn for the wholesome, the holy light enthusiast made his entrance. Ordered by Millard to fix Aryam, the Pope, with all the knowledge of her past life and emptiness, hesitated before applying his holy touch to her forehead. Millard, unimpressed, found the whole blessing affair annoying, and the Pope eventually made his exit. Aryam, curious about Millard's displeasure, asked for an explanation, but he brushed her off, sending her off to sleep. The Duke then went to Aryam's room and told her that he would change her room because her current one was too far away. He modified many things about the palace for her. Waking up in her new and improved room, Aryam marveled at the cozy comfort surrounding her. Even the vampire room was conveniently close, as if the entire mansion had undergone a magical makeover. The once jealous and mad maids now bowed to Aryam's newfound authority, creating a strangely harmonious atmosphere. Heading towards Duke Millard's office, Aryam overheard two maids discussing their reluctance to bait the vampire lord, as he was apparently acting like a monster. Well, vampire problems, right? Inside the office, Millard orchestrated a grand sit-down session, leaving Aryam twiddling her thumbs for what felt like hours. Later that night, Millard called Aryam outside his room and presented her with the chocolates. Before your imagination runs wild, let me clarify. They were delicious chocolates. Aryam graciously thanked the Duke, but something seemed off. Millard's face was downcast, leaving Aryam in a state of perplexed, chocolatey confusion. He needed Flora as he was hungry. They all freaked out and hastily grabbed another girl instead of Flora. For Flora, the blood-sucking gig, the poor girl they picked was terrified. So Aryam decided to be the peace ambassador and clear up her confusion. Aryam, with a mental eye roll, headed to the Duke's lair. On the way, she couldn't shake off the feeling that the new girl was a mini-her when she first landed in this peculiar palace. When she finally reached the Duke's office, she revealed about the new recruit for Flora. Now Duke, in all his blood-sucking glory, sauntered over to check out the new girl. However, he couldn't quite read Aryam's expression. Confusion struck him like a lightning bolt, and he got all anxious, feeling like he messed something up. As Duke approached the sobbing girl, something snapped inside him, and he ended up squeezing her neck a bit too hard. Oops! Realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and he stepped back, regret washing over his vampire conscience. Seeking redemption, he asked the girl about human-like gestures to do something nice for Aryam. The girl, still sniffling, suggested a raise or some cold, hard cash. As she rambled on, Duke's super-sensitive vampire nose caught a whiff of blood. Outside the room, Aryam's patience was wearing thin. She envisioned the worst and, fueled by memories of her own entry into this bizarre palace, pulled out a dagger, giving her finger a little paper cut for dramatic effect. Just as she was ready to superhero her way into the room, Duke intercepted her. He realized she thought he was turning the girl into a snack, and his delicate femboy ego took a hit. Aryam assured him it was just a déjà vu moment, and the Duke, looking slightly wounded, retreated into his lair. That night, like a mysterious nocturnal creature, he vanished into the forest without a word. Well, you see, Millard, the Duke of Brooding, wasn't really a sissy femboy, but more like a lonely vampire with a serious case of the blues. His childhood was basically a vampire version of being grounded forever. The next day, Irene strolled into her room, expecting to find Millard, but he was nowhere in sight. A whole week went by, and still no sign of the elusive Duke. Puzzled, she lounged on her bed, wondering where on earth the Duke had vanished to and what kind of shenanigans he was up to. Just as her thoughts were spiraling into a worry-fueled daydream, there was a knock on her door. Lo and behold, it was the Duke himself. Before Uriam could even process his presence, he gave her head all. "Got you dirty." "Dirty?" "Not that type of head." He presented her with the severed head of the slave trader who had captured her. Duke then told her that he had single-handedly cleared out the entire slave trader market and liberated Uriam. Instead of jumping for joy, Uriam was still processing the information, but Duke misread her expression. Thinking she was disappointed, Duke transformed into a full-blown simp, desperately asking her how he could make her happy. In a fit of anxiety, Duke broke down, even going as far as kneeling in front of her, begging for forgiveness. Uriam, surprised by the dramatics, picked him up. But Duke continued to plead, convinced she saw him as a monster. The next morning, Millard dived first into a mountain of letters like a paper-hungry detective on a mission. Uriam, his trusty sidekick in the noble art of dustbin duty, stood by his side. As Millard sifted through the stack, he spotted the prestigious Eck Miller invitation letter, gave it a casual nod, and expertly tossed it into the not-interested pile. Uriam, now promoted from garbage lady to chief name, Cutter took on her new role with a determined flourish. Later that night, a grateful Uriam thanked Millard for liberating the slaves, sharing that it reminded her of her own captivity. Millard suddenly connected the dots. He realized that when Uriam spoke of her initial day in that world, she meant the day she got caught by slavers in a moment of delusional glory. Millard asked if she wanted to go back home. Ariam, with a dose of reality, explained that going back wasn't in the cards for her. Millard breathed a sigh of relief, interpreting her words as a sign of affection. The next morning, Duke sat in his office looking like a corporate slave burning the midnight oil. Uriam, stationed comfortably on a couch, couldn't help but notice his pale demeanor. Being the inquisitive soul he was, he decided to dive into the mysteries of Uriam's past life, asking about her academic endeavors. Uriam revealed she was once a shining academic star with dreams of becoming a civil servant. Millard, looking like he just discovered a parallel universe, was shocked at her studious past and immediately began comparing her to the students in his world. He summoned Julio Almaz, the librarian advisor, to be Uriam's academic mentor. The studying journey began in the afternoon, and Uriam couldn't help but feel a bit out of her element. Meanwhile, at the maid mess, the head maid burst in with a grand function on the horizon, and all servants could pen down their requests for wages or bonuses. Cheers erupted from the staff, but Uriam, in a rare moment of worry, realized she couldn't navigate the festivities alone. Off to Isabel she went, requesting her company for the upcoming shenanigans. A visit to Duke's office ensued, but Millard was deep in a bad mood. Uriam, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his corporate slave heart, shared her festival plans with Isabel, only to unintentionally exacerbate Millard's already grumpy state. The next day, with all servant requests completed, Millard made a dramatic exit from the palace. A curious servant asked Aryam why she wasn't joining him for the parade. Baffled but eager for adventure, she decided to ditch the office and hit the festival with Isabel. At the lively festival, Uriam decided to go incognito, sporting a hat to keep her black locks and identity under wraps. Meanwhile, over at the Emperor's palace, Duke Ek Miller encountered the formidable presence of Duke. However, Duke's mood wasn't exactly festive as he brooded over the idea of Uriam enjoying herself without him. Logan, ever the voice of reason, advised Duke against making a scene. Duke, caught in the whirlwind of thoughts about a mere maid, found himself in a tangle of emotions. Enter the femboy prince, ready to apologize but equally ready to stir the pot. Inquiring about Uriam, Duke grumpily asserted that the prince had no business knowing about her. The prince, observing this, realized his plan to pique Duke's interest in Uriam was working like a charm back at the function. As the parade finally kicked off, Duke found himself holding a leash with the headmaid on the other end, the center of attention for the parade. The headmaid took the spotlight. During the parade, the crowd erupted in cheers, leaving Duke in the dust like "My crush neglects me." The parade itself was a dazzling spectacle, and the entire audience soaked up the enjoyment. Once the glitter settled, everyone returned to their usual festival shenanigans. On the way back, Uriam couldn't help but inquire about the headmaid's strange position with Duke. Isabel spilled the beans, revealing that she was initially Duke's chosen companion because, well, there wasn't anyone else around. Isabel clarified that sitting on a horse with a woman beside you symbolized obedience, and she dropped the bomb that she was Duke's initial pick. They took a breather at a fried chicken stall, where Isabel casually suggested Uriam could be the priestess in the parade. Uriam, not feeling the whole horseback obedience vibe, questioned the term priestess. Isabel, in her typical straightforward style, recounted a scandalous tale of a viscount who accidentally brought his side piece instead of his fiancée to the parade. The woman on the horse became the equivalent of soul, if young, and a priestess, if old. Uriam had missed the chance to be the youthful soul equivalent. Opportunity knocked, but she didn't answer. Isabel then revealed that she was paid to be friendly to advise her to sing her praises in front of the Duke. They wrapped up the function with more enjoyment and headed back to the palace. Millard, returning and still fuming over his encounter with the princess, fretted about whether Uriam cared about the medal he received. In a surprise twist, he decided to check on her in her room, only to be greeted by Uriam like it was his birthday surprise. The grumpy old grandpa Duke didn't seem impressed at all with Ariam's excitement. He brushed off her enthusiasm, telling her not to force herself into these things. Ariam, determined to make her point, retorted that she wasn't forcing herself. She genuinely wanted to do it. Sensing his displeasure, she quickly apologized and suggested she should leave. Just as she was about to make her exit, Duke halted her with a gruff voice, instructing her to light the candles and share the tales of her day. Reluctantly, they both settled down and Uriam revealed every detail as she narrated. Duke, in his own gruff way, asked if she had fun. She beamed and replied, "It was awesome. Tons of fun." Suddenly, Duke sprang from his chair and fetched a sky lantern from another room. He suggested they send it together. They ascended to the terrace, lit it up, and watched it float into the night sky. Uriam couldn't help but feel genuinely happy, and it dawned on Millard that, grumpy as he may be, he had managed to bring joy to her day. The next day, Duke surprised Uriam with an invitation to the Emperor's birthday. However, apprehension set in as she worried about judgment at this royal event. Duke reassured her, but Uriam still feared potential humiliation. Eventually she agreed, only to realize the celebration was in 3 months, not enough time to master dance and etiquette. During a study session with her advisor, Ariam told him about Duke's invitation. Desperate for guidance, she pressed the advisor, who bluntly admitted he couldn't do much. Undeterred, she insisted, and he reluctantly agreed to look into it. After their study session, the advisor spilled all the beans to Duke, who, in his typical grumpy fashion, declared that Uriam thinks way too much. The advisor, trying to be helpful, suggested bringing in Elsa for etiquette lessons. But that idea didn't sit well with Duke, who promptly told him to stay in his lane. The advisor, sensing the gravity of the situation, Nelton apologized, prompting Duke to warn him about the watchful eyes and the need to be more careful. Uriam's next study session started a tad early, with a mission to prepare for the upcoming birthday bash. After completing a chapter, the advisor instructed Ariam to head to a room on the second-floor east wing. As she explored, a lady named Evangeline and a nerdy-looking boy, Doran, introduced themselves. Apparently, Evangeline was there to teach Uriam the palace waltz. Once Evangeline left, another lady stepped in, ready to school Uriam in palace etiquette. Come nighttime, Uriam's back felt like she'd been in a gaming marathon with a 20-something gamer. Tired and aching, she realized Duke wasn't a furry, treating her like a pet while they chatted. Pope made a grand entrance, and Duke's expression instantly plummeted. He promptly instructed Uriam to play hostess and entertain Pope in the hall. Pope, on the other hand, unleashed his inner bargain bin counselor on Uriam, asking about her feelings in the palace, dropping the bomb that he too suffered under the missing advisor. Pope attempted some budget therapy. Before the conversation got too absurd, Duke swooped in and sent Ariam off to rest. Ignoring Duke's advice, Uriam sneakily headed to his office and stumbled upon a smuggling case report. Caught up in reading, she lost track of time. As the night dragged on, Uriam, still wide awake, practiced her walking technique in her room. Duke happened to stroll by and spotted her, a grin spreading across his face. Maybe the sight of her perfecting her walk was the unexpected highlight of his day. The next day, Duke decided to take Uriam to a jewelry shop to flex his diamond knowledge. He showed her a bunch of sparkly rocks and asked her to spot the difference. But surprise, Uriam couldn't play the spot the diamond game. While Duke disappeared into the back room with the owner, the shop lady popped up like a jack-in-the-box to greet Ariam. Outside, Duke, the high and mighty, surprisingly helped Uriam onto the carriage. Uriam raised an eyebrow, thinking it's not every day you see a Duke doubling as a personal chauffeur. But wait, Duke had an excuse ready. He claimed Uriam was as fragile as a bubble, and he didn't want her spraining an ankle. Smooth move, Duke. But Uriam found it a bit odd she didn't sign up for a Duke and a half. The next morning marked the grand finale of Uriam's dance preparation. And guess who decided to join the dance floor? None other than the Duke himself. To Uriam's surprise, the Duke had some moves. Turns out he wasn't just good at ruling a kingdom, but he could cha-cha like a champ. After a bit of twirling and spinning, they headed to the Duke's office. In his majestic office, the Duke handed Uriam the task of playing the letter ninja again. But amidst the cutting and snipping, the Duke couldn't help but wonder why Uriam seemed as slender as a stick. His frustration bubbled up. He just wanted her to be happy, and her changed attitude had him scratching his head. Later, Ariam received a letter from the prince. It was an apology letter, and the prince wanted to meet her after the birthday gala to propose something shiny and new. Duke, not thrilled about the prince's sudden interest, declared he'd handle the situation personally. At the gala, Duke and Ariam hit the dance floor. They were twirling like they were auditioning for a ballroom dancing reality show. But just as things were getting interesting, someone interrupted the Duke. While Duke was away, Uriam decided to sip on some wine like a sophisticated lady. However, the elegance was short-lived. As she started coughing and vomiting blood, the whole place collectively gasped. Talk about stealing the spotlight. At the party, in a whirlwind of drama, Duke swooped in like a superhero and caught Uriam as she dramatically pointed at the waiter, blaming him for the poisonous drink. Duke, not one for subtlety, charged at the waiter like a rhino on a mission, delivering a royal beatdown and calling in the cavalry to arrest the miscreant. Escorted to a room, Uriam looked like she had 1 HP left dangerously low on the life bar. Duke had a light bulb moment. He did a wrist-slicing maneuver and started rubbing his blood and Uriam's together like some bizarre potion-making ritual. Lo and behold, it worked. Uriam regained consciousness, probably questioning Duke's first aid techniques. Duke reassured Uriam that justice would be served to the poison-peddling scoundrel and ordered her to take a royal nap. Meanwhile, Duke stormed outside, where fate had a little meet-cute planned. With none other than the prince himself. Already simmering with anger, Duke unleashed a tirade on the prince, demanding an explanation for the letter. Shenanigans. The prince, playing the "I'm the innocent one" card, claimed it was just an apology. Duke, not buying it, punched a vase nearby, probably a priceless antique. After a heated exchange of words, Duke left the scene, leaving the prince in a state of confusion. Upon reaching the palace, Duke tucked Uriam into her bed, playing the role of the perfect caretaker. The next morning, Uriam woke up, a tad bewildered to find Duke chilling by her bedside. He confessed he was worried she might have pulled a Sleeping Beauty, which made Uriam feel like royalty. Duke, with genuine concern, explained it was akin to his childhood fear of his mom snoozing permanently. Cut to the chase. Duke spilled the beans to Uriam about the halfway point of blood transfer. Furious, he confronted Pope about why her blood wasn't purified entirely. The conversation escalated into a heated debate about black blood, light, and all things vampire. Miriam, caught in the crossfire, sat there utterly confused. Duke, not one for subtlety, yelled at her, demanding if she was aware that vampire blood coursed through her veins. Pope, grinning like a Cheshire cat, locked eyes with Uriam. With a mischievous twinkle in her eye, Uriam revealed to Duke a shared secret only the two of them were privy to. She spun a tale for Duke about getting smacked by a carriage, and Pope chimed in with the revelation that her body was a bit of an empty vessel. According to Pope, people could be categorized as either dark or light, but Uriam defied such labels. She was like an empty soda can, free. Duke connected the dots. The next day, Duke embarked on a mission to unmask the villain behind Arian's carriage encounter. The waiter spilled the beans. It was none other than Ian Fraynacker in a powwow with Logan. Duke decided they'd relocate right after the birthday gala. Meanwhile, Uriam, casually reading the newspaper, nearly choked on her coffee when she stumbled upon paparazzi headlines about her and Duke being the hottest gossip in town that night. In a move that could be misconstrued, Duke summoned Uriam to his room. However, it was not a steamy rendezvous, but a delivery, a page revealing that Ian Franagar had been caught with a forbidden book and was due for a date with the Emperor and the Council. Uriam, overjoyed at Duke's revenge plot, mentally high-fived him. The following day, Duke and Uriam set off for the estate, and upon arrival, Duke, with the grandeur of a royal pronouncement, assigned Ariam the prestigious role of official document sender and receiver. Ariam entered her room feeling like she landed in the coziest cloud ever. A bath was ready, but Uriam, not quite used to royal pampering, felt a tad out of place. The maid transformed her from regular human to royalty with a salon session fit for a queen. As the night rolled in, the royal estate party kicked off, and Uriam was all dolled up like a princess. A royal with a femboy flair named Ashel came over, flashing a charming smile and trying to win her over. Duke, feeling a sudden surge of jealousy, warned Ashel to keep his distance. Looks like someone woke up on the grumpy side of the royal bed. Uriam sat next to Duke as he grabbed the mic to announce his grand return. The royal table looked like a wine lover's paradise. But Duke, being the responsible adult in the room, shut that down real quick, forgetting that in vampire years she was still in the sippy cup phase. Uriam and her grape juice-induced haze got a bit tipsy. Duke's attempts to play the sober coach failed miserably. He finally gave up and decided to play the role of the babysitter. Carrying a giggly and chatty Uriam, Duke escorted her to her room. She was blabbering about who knows what, probably the secrets of the universe or her favorite snack. Duke, like a pro, tucked her into bed. In her tipsy state, Ariam got a bit emotional and asked Duke what she'd accomplished during their time together. Duke told her she changed him in his whole royal routine. Ariam drifted off into dreamland with a smile on her face, leaving Duke to contemplate life choices. The next morning, Uriam woke up with her blanket, looking like a skyscraper at sunrise. Uriam woke up with a big smile on her face because Duke dropped the bomb last that she's super special to him. In the library, Duke turned into a vampire chemist, cooking up a secret recipe to turn Uriam into a bloodsucker like him. Duke, the master chef of vampire conversion, started spicing up Uriam's meals with a dash of his own blood. Uriam, clueless about the behind-the-scenes drama, went off to her office. Ariam headed back to her room, feeling a bit down because she hadn't laid eyes on Duke all day. Meanwhile, Duke was in vampire lab mode. A maid swooped in and announced dinner time, guiding Urium to a fancy room with a glass window. Lo and behold, Duke was there, looking paler than a ghost. Urium figured Duke might need a refill of that red stuff soon. The idea of Duke sipping on someone else's blood made Urium feel a mix of queasy and jealous. So, being the smooth talker she is, she asked if they could make this dinner for two thing a regular deal. Duke, with his pale but polite face, agreed to the proposal. The next day, Ariam got a mysterious package from a tram, and the royal smarty pants revealed that it was from a swanky place called Ballatine. He went on about flowers and beauty while Urium searched for Duke to deliver the goods. Unfortunately, Duke was MIA, so the smarty pants suggested leaving him a note. Urium jotted down a message, but the smarty pants got a chuckle, thinking it sounded a bit too steamy. Meanwhile, in another corner of the story, Millard was counting down the days, holding a mysterious black potion like he was waiting for a cosmic sale. Back in the library, Irene was scratching her head, wondering why Duke agreed to all those emperor terms. Way back when advisors tried to clear things up, then boom, Duke walked in asking about that steamy note. Off they went to retrieve the mysterious package, and with Duke strolling beside her, Ariam turned into a blushing mess. Then the plot thickened when Duke handed her a super top secret package. Drumroll, please. Turns out it was just a brochure from a summer clothing store. Duke, being all mysterious Sigma male, told her to pick out her summer wardrobe but made it clear she's footing the bill. Sugar daddy alert or not, the clothes and the brochure were practically on a clearance sale. Ariam, wide-eyed, probably thought Duke was being overly generous, but oh no, Duke got it all wrong, thinking she found the prices too high. Ready for the superhero move, Duke declared he'd make the store drop their prices even more. Urium had to be the voice of reason, telling him it's already cool. Then came dinner fashionably late, and Ariam couldn't help but wonder why they were having an eBay dinner party after everyone else had ghosted the dining room. In between bites, she dropped the bomb. When are my fab clothes arriving? Duke's jealousy radar going off, Duke asked. Who's the lucky person she's dressing up for? Uriam, cool as a cucumber. Shut that down, saying it's all for her own fabulous self. Post-meal, the server slid over some mysterious pills. Duke revealed they were the ultimate poison protection pills. Uriam, skeptical but game, gulped them down, and with a twinkle in her eye, bright and early, Isabel transformed Uriam into a picnic-ready queen. While brushing her hair, little Uriam's tummy rumbled and she wanted a snack. But Isabel wasn't having any of it, fearing Uriam might end up looking like Big Show from WWE. Apparently, ladies don't chow down, or so Isabel claimed. Ariam was shocked. Did she just get called a lady? All dolled up, Ariam sashayed into the hall, and there stood Duke, looking like he just discovered a secret treasure. The carriage ride to the picnic spot was like a nerdy first date, with awkward compliments flying left and right. Valitnen, the picnic destination, turned out to be a field of dreams covered in gorgeous flowers. Also, a bunch of servants and maids were on the picnic. Duke and Ariam strutted through the flowery wonderland. Uriam excused herself to whip up a flower ring for Duke in the fields. She slid it on his finger, and voila. Duke was over the moon. In the end, it turned out to be a wholesome picnic. Back at the estate, Ariam discovered some letters that smelled like a flower shop on steroids. She turned into Sherlock Holmes and confronted the estate royal about the fragrance mystery. Dodging the question like a pro, he ninja-dashed away, leaving Uriam with more questions than answers. She handed him the letters, but he casually tossed them into the basket, setting off Uriam's curiosity alarm. With a magnifying glass in hand, Uriam peeked into the basket and, surprise, found a love letter from someone named Rosanna to Duke. She got jealous seeing that the letters from Rosanna kept flooding in, and so did Ariam's jealousy. At dinner, she looked rough and worried, probably due to the mystery love notes. Duke noticed and asked, but Ariam, pulling a classic move, claimed she was just tired. The next day, the estate royal played Cupid and granted Uriam permission to dive into the love letter saga. She sprinted, opened the letter, And oh boy, it was like reading a text version of a Playboy magazine. Jealousy over 9,000 that evening. Aryam pulled the "I'm sick" card to skip dinner with Duke. Little did she know, Duke was worried sick about her. He played detective, caught her red-handed strolling the hallway, and without saying a word, knew she was avoiding him. The next day, Duke decided to dive into the Rosanna drama and read the letters himself. But surprise, surprise, he didn't tell the estate royal. The estate royal, sensing Duke's cluelessness, had to play detective and informed him that Uriam was feeling blue because of a classic case of jealousy. Duke, being Duke, assumed it was just a one-sided crush from his end. Meanwhile, Aryam was stuck in a love letter tornado, unable to focus on anything. Fast forward to dinner that night, and Duke revealed it to Aryam. He took charge and told her he handled the Rosanna situation by sending her a rejection letter. Turns out, some random human who barely knows Duke wrote a love letter, and Duke was not having it. Then Irene dropped a bomb of her own. She asked Duke about Sol, the supposed god of their world. Duke, the bearer of truths, shattered her hopes by revealing Sol was just a metaphorical light, not a wish-granting deity. Ouch. The next morning, in the midst of Isabel making Uriam fabulous, Uriam sought advice on confessing love. Isabel, the love guru, dished out some wisdom, and Uriam took notes. At the dining table, Uriam tried to play it cool. Uriam, being the curious soul, asked if Duke had a wish since he was folding those origami birds. Duke revealed, confessing he thought Sol wouldn't grant Aryam's wishes, so he was hoping the cranes could work some magic. Aryam, emotionally overwhelmed, dropped her fork upon hearing this heartfelt revelation. Grateful, she thanked Duke, who, being a humble soul, insisted he was just trying. Taking inspiration from Rosanna, Aryam decided to write Duke a love letter. However, tension hit her like a ton of bricks, and she couldn't come up with a single word. It took her an entire night to compile a letter. In a bold move, she handed it over to the royal estate, gave copies to the maid and advisor, and ordered a letter delivery extravaganza to Duke. Fast forward a few hours, and as Uriam was returning to her office, Duke came rushing in like a rom-com hero, embracing her tightly. Turns out he got the letter, a declaration of Uriam's love in written form. So there they were, wrapped up in a tight hug, and Duke spilled the love beans. He promised Uriam that he'd be her knight in shining armor, ready to protect her from any drama life throws at them. Aryam, being the independent adult she is, wanted to earn her own cash. Duke reluctantly agreed to let Aryam keep her work mojo, but fear not, he shifted gears and started plotting their wedding. The next day, Duke showed up at Aryam's office and the air got thick with romance. They were all touchy-touchy, doing the whole lovey-dovey dance. But guess who crashed the party? The estate royal. Barging in like a drama queen, she scolded Duke for not keeping his lovey-dovey moments in check during work hours. Back in his room, Duke, feeling like a love-struck teenager, worried about being too pushy, he popped some sleeping pills, hoping not to disturb Uriam during her work. Uriam woke him up, and they had a cute romantic moment over breakfast. Duke, attempting to be charming, asked Uriam out on a boat date. So, Uriam agreed to Duke's boat date plan. On the big trip day, Aryam was dolled up and ready to roll, leaving Duke in total awe. They hopped into the carriage, cruising toward their boating adventure. During the ride, Aryam decided to school Duke in the finger-counting game, but he was basically the losing champion, so she came up with a fun punishment, a little wrist tap for the loser. Duke wasn't a fan, proposing an "I love you" confession instead. Finally, they reached the boating spot. Back at the estate, the gossip mill was churning about Duke and Uriam. Some folks were cheering for them, while others were waving the no-go flag drama alert at the estate. After a fun day of boating, Duke and Uriam landed at the Basil family's place, where the hosts were in a room. Dilemma. The Basils wondered if Duke and Uriam should bunk together or get separate sleeping spaces at dinner. Just as Uriam was about to dig in, Duke, the ultimate food taster, checked her meal for any sneaky poison. After dinner, the ladies brainstormed about Uriam and Duke's night setup. Isabel, taking charge of Uriam's makeover, spilled the beans that they'd be roommates for the night. Uriam, at a sprightly 20, got a tad worried about the whole sleeping arrangements. No one's trying to catch a case here. As Isabel pampered Uriam and sorted out her hair, she dropped the bomb about the shared room plan. Nervous but compliant, Uriam was led to the room where Duke was already playing possum. When she entered, he pulled a fake sleep stunt. Uriam planted a goodnight kiss, and just when she thought the drama was over, Duke pulled off a surprise. "I'm awake, move," and returned the favor with a smooch. Duke, realizing he'd jumped the gun, sprinted out of the room in embarrassment. He decided to crash in another room for the night, probably thinking he needed a timeout. The next day, Ariam gave Duke the cold shoulder. Poor guy was fretting big time. Uriam and Isabel were hanging out in the garden, and Isabel, being the peacemaker, asked if the two lovebirds had a spat. Uriam just chuckled it off, but Isabel knew better and begged her to patch things up with Duke. As they left the garden, Duke finally mustered the courage to say sorry, but guess what? Uriam had already pulled a vanishing act. Later, on the carriage ride back to their estate, Duke spilled the apologies, admitting he acted like a total goofball. Back at the estate late at night, Duke was in his office going through his stash of mysterious black liquid, the stuff he'd been giving Uriam. Now Uriam, poor thing, was basically experiencing Duke's childhood nightmares in her dreams. And trust me, it wasn't a walk in the park. Duke knew that turning a Riam into a vampire was a one-way street. No U-turns allowed. But Uriam, being the smart cookie she is, had her suspicions. She sensed the vampire makeover plan but decided to play it cool, waiting for Duke to spill the immortal beans. Meanwhile, Ariam was juggling pros and cons like a circus performer. Duke, a socially awkward vampire maker, didn't exactly shine in the boyfriend department, yet she decided to cut him some slack, giving him a final shot at redemption if he messed up. She had a vampire card ready to play eternal silence. In the midst of her contemplation, Duke barged into her room. Ariam, with a raised eyebrow, fired questions about her impending vampire status. Then she pulled out the big guns, channeling her inner drama queen. She demanded more of Duke's mysterious black liquid, playing the girlfriend on her period card. You know, the classic move. So Duke figured out that Ariam caught wind of his whole vampire-making scheme. He chickened out from coming clean and did a confused lap around the estate. Poor guy was sweating bullets, worrying if Uriam would go all Hulk on him. After some internal pep talk, Duke mustered the courage to face the moody Uriam again. She was standing there giving him the stink eye. He mumbled a sorry, but Uriam wasn't having it. She demanded the classic move. "Get on your knees, mister." So there's Duke on his knees, spilling his feelings. He spilled that he didn't want her to kick the bucket and was desperate to make her happy before knowing about her sacredness. He was just a guy worried about his girl's mortality. He spilled about humans being fragile and having short lives. Like, was that a personal attack? Anyway, Duke went on about loving her, not wanting her to croak, and deciding darkness infusion was the cure. He was willing to go to extremes to keep her, blinded by the hope of eternal togetherness. Ariam softened up, probably realizing Duke wasn't just brewing trouble. She hugged him, dropping the wisdom bomb that he should never pull a stunt like that without her consent. Duke, grateful for the mercy, promised to consult her on major life decisions from now on. Then Duke, ever the smooth talker, pitched the vampire life. As the VIP passed to safety in their dangerous world, Uriam argued that life's beauty lies in its expiration date. Duke, persistent as a fly at a picnic, insisted on eternity together. Uriam decided she won't join the vampire club, and instead, she asked Duke about his biggest worry. With her staying human, Duke revealed that he feared vengeful humans might target her to get back at him. Then Duke proposed to marry her. When she's rocking granny vibes, he declared that wrinkles and all don't bother him. He just wanted that Granny Pete sass talk about commitment. Duke swore to smash any humans who dared mess with Uriam. Before she hit the big 100, Uriam, touched by the pledge, hugged him and told him to bring on the revenge if needed. Duke promised to unleash chaos if anything happened. Now, Duke believed Pope could cure Uriam, but warned her it might sting a bit. Later that night, Pope arrived. but he was a bit puzzled by the dark vibes in the air. When he realized what Duke had done to Uriam, he unleashed a big brother level of scolding, probably louder than when someone messes with his PS5 controller. After the verbal storm, Duke assured Uriam that Pope would work his magic to save her. The next morning, Duke transformed Uriam into a fashion-forward, vampire-repellent superhero with a cape and escorted her to a church where Pope was ready for action. Uriam kneeled, and Pulp began his purification routine. However, things took a dark turn when Pulp's thumb touched Uriam's forehead and blood started oozing out. She took an unexpected nap, unconscious style. Uriam woke up all snug in her bed, sunshine beaming through. She noticed the sunlight didn't feel like a BBQ on her skin anymore. So she asked Duke if the cure worked. But guess what? Duke, playing the silent game, didn't spill the beans. Furious, Uriam inquired about Pope's whereabouts. Duke revealed that Pope would be fashionably late because he overdid his magical energy tricks. Uriam, feeling like Rip Van Winkle, asked how long she was out. Duke revealed that it was a whopping 3 days. Now, that's what you call beauty sleep. Then Duke, the drama king, started shaking like a leaf. He spilled his guts, confessing he thought Uriam was on her way to the great beyond. He blamed himself for all the blood and tears, thinking he'd turned into a professional sin-committing machine. As Duke was having his moment of moron, Pope made his grand entrance. Uriam, grateful for the rescue, thanked him for the life-saving gig. She couldn't help but poke the question about the purification process. Pope, being the wizard with the answers, declared it done and dusted. Uriam officially joined the Sultra Club. Now Duke, in full simp mode, begged Uriam to stick around for the grand finale. So Uriam dropped a truth bomb on Duke, telling him she's loving the human life. In their world, being human meant caring and taking risks. And Duke, being her knight in shining armor, was doing just that, taking care of her and facing the risk of losing her. The next day was a royal family shindig, and they all gathered around the table for lunch. But Uriam and Duke pulled a Romeo and Juliet sitting on opposite ends. As the royal gossip session heated up, a servant with a bottle of wine approached Uriam. Later they strolled through flower fields, and Uriam, thanks to that wine, was as tipsy as a cat on a hot tin roof. In her merry state, she popped the big question. Would Duke protect her and stick by her side? Duke, being the smooth operator, brushed it off like a pro. But little did Uriam know, Duke had a surprise up his sleeve. As they sauntered along, Uriam spotted a fancy dome ahead, hit her like a ton of bricks. Duke was about to pull a proposal stunt. Lo and behold, Duke went all out, proposing in a romantically epic way, sliding a ring on Uriam's finger and sealing the deal with a kiss. The news spread faster than a squirrel on roller skates, and folks were buzzing with excitement about the upcoming royal wedding. In the cozy palace, the Duke and Uriam were enjoying their time together. Rumor has it they even engaged in a bit of friendly wrestling the night before. The Duke, however, received an invitation that seemed to be missing an important detail. While snuggled up next to Uriam, the Duke couldn't resist his peculiar fetish of hair sniffing. He was having a grand old time playing with Uriam's locks. The next day, they set out to find a suitable match for the Duke's sister Flora. But oh dear, Uriam wasn't too thrilled about the whole matchmaking business. She boldly asked why the Duke wasn't considering using her blood for Flora's needs. Instead of giving a straight answer, the Duke suggested they sleep in separate beds for a few days. As they reached their destination, the Duke looked as pale as a vampire on a night shift. Uriam, being nearly immortal with her strong muscle mommy vibes, assured him she could handle anything. In the midst of their library adventure, he suddenly passed out. When he woke up in bed, feeling like a deflated balloon, he was not in the mood for sipping on other ladies' blood. Just as he pondered his life choices, a beautiful lady waltzed in, claiming the king was worried and had sent her for Flora. Things took an unexpected turn as the lady decided to play a round of royal twister on top of the Duke. The situation got pretty intense. And just when things were heating up, in walked Uriam at the most awkward moment possible. Witnessing the scene, she swiftly turned around, dagger in hand, ready to tackle the royal drama. So the Duke, feeling like a shaky leaf in a windstorm, shuffled over to Uriam. Now, you'd expect Uriam to be all fired up or annoyed, right? Surprise, surprise. She went in for the hug, telling the Duke to chillax and recharge his batteries on the bed. Then this other lady, the blood messenger for Flora, barged in. She then revealed, if that's the case, he should skip the buffet and sip on her blood smoothie. The Duke was a bit worried, like a kid thinking broccoli might be gross. But Uriam was all in. He took a little nip from her neck and bam, it was like the best dessert he ever had. Tears started flowing like he just watched a puppy video. Next day, they were on their way to Grinnell, a place with a fancy farm belt, claiming their juices were fit for an emperor. But trouble struck and they had to make an unexpected pit stop in Manfred City for the night. Duke wasn't throwing a party in his head about it. Turns out he had some not-so-sweet memories of Manfred because they were all about that vampire life. They finally reached the Manfred Palace and got a royal welcome from the owner, who ushered them in like VIPs. Inside, Uriam spotted a girl with blue hair named Julia. No fear of black-haired wonders here at the dinner table. Uriam eyed the tea suspiciously, thinking, is this some Scooby-Doo mystery? But the house lady gulped it down like it was a smoothie, so Uriam figured it was safe. No poison today. The house lady, with all the subtlety of a detective in a mystery novel, started asking Uriam about her marriage plans. She dug deep, wanting to know if Uriam got any pearls of wisdom on tying the knot. Now here comes the plot twist. The house lady was acting fishier than a penguin in a fruit market. She called in a servant demanding the finest hot coffee, and then dropped the bomb. She asked Uriam to send away her posse, the bodyguard and handmaid, for a little tea to teat. Alone at last, she straight up asked Uriam if she really wanted to sign up for the vampire wife gig. Uriam was like, say what now? The lady painted a pretty grim picture, talking about enduring marriage for eternity and serving up blood cocktails to Duke forever. To drive her point home, she showed Uriam a scar on her own hand like a creepy vampire membership card. The lady wrapped it up with a horror movie speech about the terrifying life of marrying a vampire, then made a dramatic exit. Fast forward to Uriam finding Duke in a room, nose buried in a book. She was all shades of blue, and Duke, being the attentive partner, noticed the sadness. He pops the question and Uriam spills the beans about the house lady's warning against the vampire wedding. Duke, after hearing about that, got so riled up that he stormed out with Uriam's dagger in hand. Drama queen much, but Uriam the peacekeeper stepped in like a boss before Duke could unleash some dagger dance moves. The next day at the grand function, people couldn't help but admire Uriam's fabulous hair. All eyes were on Uriam as people couldn't help but glance at her fabulous hair. She felt the attention and decided to join in the hair talk. Uriam casually mentioned that both her parents had black hair and then fired back with the questions. The lady in the hot seat blushed and revealed about inheriting her hair from dear old dad. Enter Duke. He waltzed in and, without missing a beat, offered to put asphalt on the lady's hair if she was feeling jealous. Uriam, being the girl power advocate, grabbed Duke's hand and shut down the potential hair crisis, declaring it a girl talk zone. As the guests kept streaming in, Duke and Uriam got separated. Duke, contemplating whether to retreat to his room, got intercepted by the Manfred man. The man revealed about his wife being rude to Uriam. Duke, in his cool Duke style, waved it off, claiming Uriam didn't mind. But the Manfred man had a secret mission and escorted Duke to a so-called safe place. Duke, raising an eyebrow, followed him, thinking it might be a hidden snack. It wasn't. Instead, they ended up in a dungeon with a massive metal door. Duke, losing his patience, demanded the man tell him what he was up to. But nope, the man was all about suspense. He claimed the real safe place was a bit farther, leading Duke to a devil church with a throne fit for a vampire king. The man spilled about their need for a place to share faith and encouragement. Duke shut that down real quick. Instead, he asked the man to tell the real tea about Uriam, and oh boy, it got intense. The man spilled that while Uriam might be a looker with good manners, all she really wanted was the power promised by some mysterious edict. The Manfred man went all storyteller and claimed that Uriam revealed to his wife. According to him, Uriam spilled the Duke saying she's marrying him because he's a rich, handsome hunk who showers her with love. Classic gold digger accusations, right? Duke stood up from his throne and decided to make a grand exit. But the Manfred man played his trump card, trying to guilt-trip Duke by hinting that Urium might just be in it for the money. Apparently he didn't want their vampire god falling into the clutches of a supposed gold digger. Hearing this, Duke had had enough. He gave the man a smile that probably screamed, "Nice try, buddy," and made it clear that he'd never change his mind about Urium. Exit stage left. Meanwhile, back in Urium's world, she was on a mission. Worried about Duke's disappearance, she decided to put her detective skills to use. She asked Isabel for some tongs because, every good detective needs tools. She had a plan to heat the ring and check if it held any secrets. Just as she was about to turn her plan into action and put the ring over a candle flame, Isabel showed up. Urium told Isabel she needed a bit of privacy, and off Isabel went. Urium heated the ring, only to find a hidden vow of their partnership. Duke appeared out of the blue, casually mentioning that he had already told this before. As Urium put the ring back on, it felt a tad heavier. Duke, in a surprising burst of sweetness, tossed a blanket over Urium, fearing she'd catch a cold from her detective escapades. Morning rolled in and surprise, heavy rain outside. Eager to escape, Manfred felt a bit down. Duke broke the news that they'd be stuck there for another night. Logan popped in with a bunch of documents and Duke decided to put in some work, taking the day off. Urium, bored out of her mind, tried reading, but to no avail. She suggested to Duke that she'd visit the birdhouse. Duke told her to take a guard with her. As Urium ventured outside, she bumped into the Manfred lady in the hallway. Small talk ensued, with Urium mentioning she was off to the greenhouse. The Manfred lady, with a sudden interest in horticulture, asked if she could tag along. Urium and the Manfred lady sat in the greenhouse like they were on some kind of awkward plant-themed date. The Manfred lady, probably trying to be polite after her previous rudeness, asked Urium about her day. Urium wasn't exactly thrilled to be hanging out with her. But hey, safety in numbers, right? The Manfred lady, doing her best apology routine, said sorry for being a bit rude the other day. She revealed stuff going on at home, and Urium, being the understanding soul, shared that it even reached Duke. But it seems the message got a bit tangled along the way. Urium reassured her it was all good, even if Millard was giving her the stink eye. After a little chat, they decided to explore the flower wonderland around the greenhouse. Urium, stumbling upon some gorgeous white flowers, was in awe. But the Manfred lady pulled the classic "I've got chores to do" excuse, holding a pair of scissors like she's on a mission. Left to her own devices, Urium got teamed up with the green-haired girl, Julia, who showed her the bird scene. Urium, feeling like a bird whisperer, started feeding them. Just when things were getting chirpy, the green-haired girl pulled a plot twist. She tried to take Urium down. Urium's guard swooped in like a boss, blocking the attack, and yelled at Urium to make a run for it. Urium, with a painful cut on her hand, ran like her life depended on it. Which, let's be real, it kinda did. The guard lady, showing off her dagger-throwing skills, tossed one to Urium like they were playing some wild game of catch. But the Manfred lady popped up like she's part of the action movie cast. Urium accused the Manfred lady of being in on the whole "let's take down Urium" plan. She warned her to keep a safe distance and made a grand exit from the greenhouse, throwing the dagger for good measure as Urium sprinted, pondering the craziness. Duke, with his superhero senses, sniffed out her blood trail. He raced towards her, scooped her up, and dashed back to the palace. Faster. Back at the palace, Isabel, always ready for a crisis, went into nurse mode. Duke licked Urium's wound until it magically closed up. Forget band-aids. It's all about vampire saliva. So Duke, in his "I'm the boss" mode, summoned the guard lady and called in the dynamic duo, Manfred man and lady. The guard lady revealed the assassin chose a shortcut to the afterlife, leaving everyone puzzled. But they nabbed the Manfred duo for this circus. Manfred man, unleashing his inner drama queen, screamed about the Emperor's wrath and how they'll pay for this. Logan scolded the guard lady for kickstarting this whole mess. In the middle of this shouting fest, Duke walked in. Silence fell like a royal decree. Everyone shut up. Duke, probably channeling his inner volcano, looked ready to erupt. He marched up to Manfred Mann, who started pleading innocence. Duke decided to give Manfred Mann a taste of his own medicine. He grabbed the broken arm and gave it a royal squeeze, causing Manfred Mann to cry like a baby. But Duke wasn't done. He added a dash of artistic flair by slashing Manfred Mann's face. Duke strutted away. The next morning, Uriam woke up feeling surprisingly spry. Isabel, with her soup game on point, brought a bowl to Uriam. But why soup for just a tiny cut on the arm? Confusion set in. Suddenly apologizing for not acing the protection gig, Uriam checked if the guard lady's hands were still in tip-top shape. Good news. They were. Night fell, and Uriam yet again got a soup delivery from Isabel, just as she was sipping on her mystery soup. In walked Duke, sporting a bathrobe like he just conquered a royal mud wrestling match. Tired and probably in need of a spa day, Duke rejected Uriam's chef offer, claiming she needed to preserve her energy. Uriam, sensing Duke's bad mood, pulled the classic "I'll go brush my teeth" excuse because good oral hygiene is a royal priority. When she returned, Duke was still in the same gloomy position. Uriam, being the caring empress, asked the big question, "What's eating you?" Duke apologized, swearing he'd protect Uriam from any harm, saying revenge was like his royal duty or something. Duke revealed that he messed up their faces and limbs and threw them into temple prison. But Uriam, not a fan of watching people turn crispy, suggested they make a swift exit at sunrise. However, the next morning, Pope delivered the news of central investigators and fact-finders descending upon Manfred. Surprise, surprise, they had to extend their stay in this drama-filled town. Uriam, probably thinking she's in a never-ending royal soap opera, revealed to the investigators, just when she thought they could finally escape, more troubles knocked on their royal door, forcing them to stick around a tad longer. Where does Pope come from? Pope, whose real name was Ezra Travis. From the day he popped into this world, he was a bit peculiar. He couldn't walk straight, and to make things interesting, he saw people for what they really were on the inside. No fake masks for Pope. He saw through all of that. One day, his mom dragged him to meet the intimidating Duke. Now Duke was as dark as a black hole, and Pope got the heebie-jeebies just being near him. From that moment on, Pope prayed like there was no tomorrow, begging the universe not to let him cross paths with the Duke again. Fast forward to the present, where Duke, Uriam, and Pope find themselves in a bit of a pickle. Duke was paranoid about security. Uriam was being all mysterious like a cat, and Pope was blabbering about the Duke snubbing the Emperor's invites. Apparently, attending once was considered a fluke. Talk about harsh critics. Pope convinced Duke that attending the Emperor's shindig was crucial for his noble street cred. He threw in the responsibility card, telling Duke that the higher up you are, the more important it is to show up at these imperial parties. Pope went to the Emperor, spun some yarn about Duke agreeing to attend, and dropped the bomb, that it was all because of Uriam. The Emperor was over the moon, and Pope was pretty pleased with himself. But as Pope helped everyone fulfill their wishes, there was no one around to grant his wish for a personal stand-up comedy show. Life's unfair, isn't it? So the next day, Pope swung by Duke's crib, and there he bumped into Uriam, who was all smiles because Pope had a knack for saving her life. Pope casually asked Uriam about their New Year's prep. Uriam revealed, saying everything was going swell. Duke, though swamped with work, still managed to join her for horse riding practice. Pope revealed to Uriam, who, being the supportive friend, assured him he was the right man for the job. They giggled and cracked jokes, making the room sound like a comedy club. Little did they know, Duke heard their laughter from the hallway. He waltzed in, telling Uriam their giggles were audible miles away. Then the interrogation began. Pope revealed that he was just there to scope out the festival preps. Pope asked Duke if he was scheming something fishy, like making him the blessing procession poster boy. Duke threw it back at Pope, saying it's his call. Fast forward to the ceremony, and Pope was decked out like the belle of the ball for the blessing procession. The town was buzzing with festival vibes, drums banging, trumpets blaring, the whole shebang. Pope, standing on the terrace, looked like a holy man descended straight from the sky. Suddenly, the emperor and empress entered the scene, making a grand entrance that would put a Hollywood red carpet to shame. But the Pope, with Uriam's pep talk echoing in his head, flashed a smile and kicked off the procession blessing ceremony. As he chanted his magical spell, glitter rained down from the sky like a sparkly blizzard. People were mind-blown. The divine power show, though, left Pope feeling a bit like a deflated balloon. As Pope strolled back into the palace, a guard praised him for the glitter extravaganza. Little did Pope know, Duke was brewing a storm of annoyance about the whole glittery situation. Fast forward to the night Pope followed a servant on a secret mission. Why? Because he got a letter from Duke saying Uriam had caught a cold and needed him. ASAP, the sneaky adventure led Pope to a candle at Wonderland, where Uriam and Duke were chilling. The Pope questioned Uriam about the letter. She apologized, praising his festival skills. But Duke was on a glitter vendetta. Annoyed that sparkles and lights invaded his personal space, Uriam revealed that they actually summoned the Pope for a lantern launch party. She handed him a lantern, and Pope, probably thinking it was a new festival trend, gladly took it. They launched the lantern into the sky. But Pope, being the clueless hero, couldn't figure out why they dragged him into this lantern affair. After the lantern show, Uriam turned into a hugging machine, embracing Duke and gushing about how happy and amazed she was. But the Pope, standing there like the third wheel at a joyous party, wasn't feeling the excitement. Nope. He was hit with a wave of jealousy, wondering how a guy with a darkness-filled soul and a girl with an empty inside could team up and find happiness. He felt like the odd one out, clueless about what would bring him joy. Now in Pope's room, he kneeled in front of a statue, contemplating life choices. So fast forward 3 years into the Duke and Uriam marriage saga. It's their anniversary day. The locals, though, thinking the empire got a bit shinier with Duke tying the knot, still saw the power couple as the kings and queens of self-centeredness. In the palace, Duke wasn't just calm, he was on cloud 9, thanking his lucky stars for snagging Uriam. Why? Because he was now immune to the fear of losing her. Duke decided to make a grand entrance into the library, where Uriam was deep into her studies. She threw some expedition and Demon Island gossip at him, but Duke had other plans. Ignoring her chit-chat, he scooped her up for a romantic kiss. Hold on, though. Uriam, being the sensible one, halted the lovey-dovey action. Duke revealed about the Demon Island, explaining it got its spooky name because it was inhabited by folks with brown skin and they were kind of rare in the empire. Now, Uriam casually dropped that people with brown skin were a dime a dozen where she came from, but Uriam, getting all serious, pointed out the empire's lack of proportion. Duke, the master of dodging serious talks, ignored her concerns and slipped into his playful and mischievous mode. The next day, Pope was doing a happy dance because Uriam revealed the second plan, but Pope was stuck in a mental pickle. He wanted that warm and fuzzy feeling he got with Duke and Uriam, thinking that becoming a high priest might be the golden ticket. Meanwhile, in Dreamland, Duke was having a dark and twisty nightmare about Uriam's grand entrance to the palace. The next day, when a chatty traveler showed up at the palace, he revealed his journey. He yapped about getting hurt, encountering folk with black hair and dark skin, and a morning ritual called Oblish. Duke grilled the traveler about the island's god, Gudillo. Duke started suspecting that Uriam might have some Demon Island connections. As Duke and Uriam rolled in a carriage to who knows where, Duke popped the question. He asked if Uriam's hometown was the infamous island. She shut that idea down, claiming she never even heard of their god. Duke, relentless in his investigation, asked if she missed her hometown. Uriam revealed that she did, and even missed her parents. He revealed to Uriam about his not-so-happy childhood, revealing he had no hometown to call his own. Then, in true nosy fashion, Duke popped the question that he wanted to know every juicy detail about Uriam's life. She revealed, spilling it all. Fast forward to noon in the palace, and Duke's mind was like a blender, processing all the info Uriam dropped about her hometown. Night bulbs turning darkness into day, weird tech stuff for him. But Duke, being the skeptic, couldn't decide if it was a wild story or pure truth. And then came the mystery of Uriam's hometown location. She played dodgeball with that question. Duke called up Pope for the 411 on Uriam's origins, but Pope couldn't recall the deets, claiming it happened way back when. So Duke, desperate for info, prodded Pope about his thoughts on Demon Island people. Pope dropped the bomb that no matter how Demon Island folks looked, they sure weren't empty vessels like Uriam. According to him, Ariam's got this soulless vibe moving around like a puppet with only memories to guide her. Now Duke, lying next to snoozing Uriam, couldn't shake off the worry about a potential third world existence. The next day, Duke was in full-on worry mode. Fearing Uriam might just up and leave to keep her by his side, he pulled the classic move of stopping her from going to a friend's birthday bash. Like a master chess player, Duke suggested they take their vows. Ariam, caught off guard, expected Duke to wait until she hit the ripe old age of 80. Duke, with anxiety levels skyrocketing, sat Uriam down for a serious talk. While holding on to her like a teddy bear, he straight up asked the big question: was Uriam from another world? Ariam, the dodgeball champion, chuckled and swerved the question like a pro. Duke pressed on, wondering why she was dodging this topic. Uriam, with her fake smile, game strong, spilled the beans. She explained that if she spilled the truth about getting teleported to their world by getting hit by a car, it would sound like a plot from a cheesy novel. With a grin as wide as the Grand Canyon, she assured Duke he knew all her secrets. Duke, overjoyed, probably did a happy dance in his mind. They shared a romantic moment, sealing the deal on their little secret sharing session. So, a couple of years flew by, and now Duke and Ariam have a little dude named Egan who just hit the big one. Menace too. At a fancy dinner with the Duke's fam, Egan's got questions. He's wondering why they're munching on breakfast while other royals are still in dreamland. Ariam, being the wise mom, throws in a curvy ball and asks Egan if he's found a girl to hang out with. Now Egan ain't into the whole dating scene. Duke senses this and assures Ariam that Egan will find his way eventually. But Egan's not having it. He storms off the table, probably contemplating the struggles of being the Duke's offspring, people talking smack, giving him the stink eye. Not a fun time. Not. Up in his room, Egan's deep in thought, hating the idea of going out just to please the masses. He knew some girl would come along, but he was already predicting the gossip behind his back. And then enter Juan Asel, Travis's kid, barging into Egan's sanctuary, begging him to go out and play. Juan played the annoying big brother card, won't take no for an answer. At the festival, Egan was majorly stressed about what people thought of him. Every laugh felt like a personal attack. Poor guy. But then, out of the blue, a girl waltzed up asking about his festival partner. Egan spilled the beans. He was partnerless because he didn't have the guts to ask anyone. Now another boy swooped in, yelling at the girl that she agreed to be his partner instead. The girl, with a swish of her imaginary cape, shut him down like a pro, promising they could team up next year. Off she went to smooth things over with the boy, leaving Egan in a whirlwind of social anxiety. After that, he and the girl both teamed up for the acorn gathering competition. But the same boy from earlier came. He started trash-talking about Egan's mom and dad, poking fun at the whole vampire-human mix. Enough was enough. Egan, channeling his inner superhero, gave that boy a heavy punch. Inside the palace, Mama Duke went into full-on worried mode when she saw Egan's battle scars. They called the Pope, but it wasn't the legendary Ezra this time. Nope, a new Pope was on the scene now. The boy's parents got the royal summons, and Duke, in all his wisdom, demanded a proper explanation. Uriam grilled the boys for the deets. Egan, sensing the impending doom, couldn't muster the courage to spill the truth, so he pulled the classic move, tears and it's all my fault routine. Uriam, playing the good cop, asked for an apology, but the girl who teamed up with Egan waltzed in, spilled the beans, and Uriam started scolding both boys like a boss. Apologies were exchanged and crisis averted as the boys' parents made their exit. Uriam whispered something mysterious in the mother's ear, leaving her trembling. Urium praised Egan for his bravery, claiming she would have thrown 100 punches if she were in his shoes. But Duke, ready to unleash his fury, got stopped by Arium, who reminded him that he already warned the family. In a heartwarming moment, Arium hugged Egan, thanking him for defending their honor. Egan realized he hit the parent jackpot with these awesome folks who guide him through problems, even the tricky ones he can't figure out on his own. Aw, the adventures of the royal family drama and healing hugs.
Love the manhwa? Subscribe for more. Your support makes it all possible. Hit subscribe now!